Welcome to URL Unzip, Reboot, and Leave, a podcast about the psychology that moves us. Through real conversations with thinkers, doers, and seekers, we explore how we adapt, evolve, and find meaning. So let's unzip, reboot, and leave. Today, our guest is John Yao, a renowned speaker, coach, communication strategist, and founder of Brightstar Consulting. He is a former national president of Professional Speakers Australia and the licensee and head of curation at TEDx Melbourne. Today, we will explore the psychology of attention and authenticity, how to speak so people truly listen, and how to convey your being, not just information. So, John, the first question for a successful talk or communication, let's say, what are necessary? Psychology, content, speaking ability, charisma. What is most essential?
Yeah, look, it's a fairly complex answer, and all those are factors that you need to consider. I think, though, that if you took it up half a step, in principle, there's you, there's your audience, and there's your message. Now, in terms of you, it's really around, are you clear? Can you articulate it in a simple way that someone can understand? There's the message itself. Sometimes that's position, sometimes the complexity, sometimes that's level. And then there's the audience, which is what do they already know or what do they need or expect? And also, what is their assumptions or biases or prior knowledge or even mental state that causes them to be open to listening to what you're talking about? And if you know that, then the message is more likely to cut through. So, in principle, if you can balance out all the things that you mentioned to address those three things, your message and your audience, then the likelihood of your message is more likely to resonate with the person you're speaking to.
Okay. And this is for one-on-one as well as in the public space?
Correct. One-on-one groups. It can even works in written form, but because the principles of communication or the psychology of communication and influence, the principles never change.
Right, right.
Speaking, whether it's on the phone, whether it's on Zoom, are mediums. And different mediums you need to manage differently, but they're just mediums.
Okay. Lot of talk these days around attention. Okay.
Yes.
What is the psychology of attention or
That's
how
a
we can hook it?
that's a fascinating one, that one. Attention, the ability to get someone's attention and keep someone's attention is a fine art. Professional speakers have 53 ways to get someone's attention and keep someone's attention. And they use combinations of that to maintain engagement throughout the talk. But those are just techniques. You still need to time your message well, and you need to make sure that your audience is primed or open to listening. And so when we're using these techniques, what we're doing is we're slowly making sure that we're angling the message in just the right way that people are open and ready to listen. So
Right.
it's a dance in many respects, as opposed to a skill set.
Mm, mm. Okay. Now, normally the informative talk, which are very dry, okay,
Yes,
and in general, like storytelling way is a better way, okay. But there are some serious informative talker, for example. I mean, Jordan Peterson can be a good example of that. He bloody talk
yes,
hard fact all the time. Still, it is engaging.
yes.
Like people like to know juicier fictional stuff or the real life stuff. I mean, what is it?
Yeah, that attention. uh, If I was to tell you a whole bunch of facts, I could arguably do that also in an email. So a lot of people forget when they're communicating, especially when speaking, is it's not a transfer information. A more efficient way to do transfer information is over the internet, email or website. So we can't rely on knowledge being the only reason why people are interested. At the other end, the art of storytelling is a biological function that spans back hundreds of thousands of years. Now, reading and writing it in the human species is about 5,000 years old. Homo sapiens, depending who you ask, is between 100,000 and 300,000 years. So the vast majority of our communication influence has been the verbal tradition in the story format. We are biologically wired for that. But if you overuse it, then it's not helpful. And there are certain times where storytelling is not helpful. For instance, I've never heard anyone share a spreadsheet as a story. Storytelling is a modality. It's not an outcome. It's not a rule. It's a technique. And it's one of the techniques you might use to get someone's attention and keep their attention. But I think that the essence of all good communication in terms of getting attention is making sure that it's simple and structured. It's got to be based on first principles. Now, one of the things that challenges people when they're sharing information is they like to share what they know rather than what people are interested in. And
Okay.
so if they're not interested, it doesn't matter how knowledgeable, right? So the example I like to give is if I said to you, today I'm going to talk to you about the coefficient of drag, you'll look at me funny. But if I said, did you know the ability to fly has existed since the planets existed? That's 13 billion years. Why is it the humanity's only been able to fly in the last 200? It's because humanity discovered and mastered four things: drag, lift, thrust, and gravity.
Okay.
When you can share or understand drag, lift, thrust, and gravity, you can make anything fly. But if you take away even one of them, flying is no longer possible. So given it's drag, lift, thrust, and gravity, let's start with the first, drag, and specifically the coefficient of drag. And
Wow.
suddenly you've created a context by which people can slot your knowledge, recognize your domain expertise, but also realize the simplicity and thought required for that piece of information to be relevant. And if it's relevant, they're more likely to listen.
So that means what you are saying, just a real life example, it doesn't mean anything. It have to be structured in that way so that it should
Correct.
come to our ears in that way.
Well, not necessarily exactly using that way. That was just the way I chose to use it. What people need to realize is there's a difference between people hearing what you say and understanding what you mean. If it means something to you and them, they're more likely to pay attention. You don't want to just lecture people. You don't want to just tell people something they're not interested in. The example I give with my TEDx Melbourne speakers is I said, you would never go to a dinner party with complete strangers, sit next to someone and say, I'm going to talk at you for the next 15 minutes. You'll be fascinated. And yet that's what a lot of people do when they try and communicate. They just go, I'm just going to start at A, I'm going to go to Z, and hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about in between. And that's not communication, that's lecturing. Lecturing is helpful in a classroom, but not usually helpful outside of the classroom. And so we need to be mindful that there's a difference between a speech, a lecture, a lesson, a talk, and a narration. And the modality we choose to meet the needs and expectations of the person we're speaking to is just as important as what's coming out of your mouth or what you know.
Normal conversation, what we narrate or what we do normally.
Most people just talk what's in their head.
Okay.
They don't really think about the structure. They don't really think about the state of themselves or the state of the person they're speaking to. They don't normally think about the bias or assumption or knowledge level of the person they're speaking to. They don't even think about what's meaningful and important to that person. They just share what came to their mind when you speak. And the challenge with that is that as a species, we're taught to read and write. We're not taught to speak and influence. And I'm a big fan of a guy called James Clear, who says, we don't rise to the level of our potential, we fall to the level of our systems. And so the
Wow.
challenge I ask anyone when it comes to speaking communication is, do you have a system for speaking, communication, and influence? And if you don't, I suggest you find one.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. When it comes to this public speaking, okay, it's a like a lot of people have a fear about it, okay, whether
Yes.
people are judging, whether people are, I don't know.
Yes.
Luckily, I don't have that much fear, but is that complication in the head coming from identity, ego, social conditioning, or something else?
It's a combination of all of those things. But I think in order to be best prepared to mitigate, because you can all have attributes, but you've got to mitigate against that attribute if you're going to, get your point across. So, two things to be mindful of is the mental and physical attributes. So, if you are anxious or nervous, you tend to breathe a bit shallower. You tend to breathe a bit faster. And that panting agitates your nervous system, which then overstimulates your mind, which causes you to waffle or go blank. So there are biological things you can do. Box breathing is one used by Olympic athletes and people in the military to moderate your breathing. And that moderates your nervous system. And the reason for that is your breathing is the only system that we know of that's both conscious and unconscious. In other words, when you are asleep, your body automatically breathes. But when you're awake, you can hold your breath, which means you can control your breathing. When you're controlling your breathing, you're controlling your nervous system. Now, there's two parts to your nervous system. There's the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight response, and we don't get to choose that. And there's the parasympathetic. That's the bit we can control when we hold our breath. But when we control our parasympathetic nervous system, we influence our sympathetic nervous system, which means we can control our anxiety levels and our oxygen levels and our nervous system through conscious breathing, conscious and deliberate breathing. And so you can do that before you even get on stage, so to speak. That's the biomechanical side. Then there's the mental state side, which is really around, am I good enough, or do I have everything in mind, memorized or not? How will I be perceived? All the psychological state-based things. And they are states. They are not fixed realities. So I would argue that any state that's not a fixed reality, it's a little bit like a mental muscle. You need to exercise it. And the more you exercise it, or probably a better way to say it, the more deliberately you exercise it for a positive outcome, the lower the probability of getting something wrong or forgetting your lines or any of the other things that make people nervous. So having adequate preparation and thinking time before you open your mouth, even if it's a third of a second, or even better if you're doing a speech, doing it before you even walk on stage, gives you deliberate control over the outcome. And so by combining the biomechanical and the psychological elements, you reduce the chance of really having your nervous system explode or your brain going blank or all the other things that people get nervous about when they're breathing. It's like me asking your name. If I said, are you sure your name's not Peter? You go, of course not, because you know your name's not Peter. If you know your content, how could you possibly get it wrong when it eventually comes out of your mouth? And I would argue that most people don't know their content well enough or clearly enough to communicate it. And that is a huge hurdle when trying to be either succinct or articulate or confident in front of someone else, on stage or otherwise.
It sounded me like it's an organic process. I mean, you can push your envelope a little bit every time you do it. So there is no
Yes,
perfect, and you have to be comfortable, like, in that balance. It's not
yes,
like someone else is doing that way. That means I have to do that way, right?
correct, correct. And then each person is unique. If you have nervous energy, you need to find a way to burn that nervous energy, you know? So there are other attributes that you need to know as you're speaking that you need to prepare for so these things don't interfere when you eventually do open your mouth.
So that means like a specific language pattern or sentence structure. Um, these things are, it doesn't lead to higher engagement, right?
Well, I mean, they are factors,
Okay.
but they're
Yeah.
not the reasons why you are successful or not successful. They're just contributors to the outcome.
I came to Australia from India as a student, and
Mhm.
my first job was in a call center. And for some reason, that call center, they used to give the new guys a very good training, so to speak. Okay. Maybe 20 years back, that's why they used to give. And
Sure.
and people who are coming from mostly from India, we used to speak fast. We used to think that if I can speak fast and if I can like drop some big words or something like that, that means good communication. And over there, they taught us that no, whatever you are saying, your accent doesn't matter. Whatever you are saying, if you are saying 4 words, the other person should understand those 4 words. This is communication. And they
Mhm.
used to hammer on that because we cannot like imitate this Caucasian accent. Um, does this accent or these things matter, or is all everything together? The body language, the intent, the vulnerability, everything matters to have an
I think,
engaging conversation.
did they, out of curiosity, do they tell you to smile even on the phone?
Yeah, they used to sometimes.
Okay. So one of the reasons, so these are again contributing factors. Speaking fast in a sales environment is actually a way of managing your state and their state. And for sales, that can be helpful as long as that person's able to keep up. Um, And so by keep up, it might be the quality of the phone call, it might be your accent, it might be their distraction, it might be they've had enough sleep, it might be they're distracted. Like there's a number of reasons why they can't keep up. But you can never know in a phone call. So I would argue that in more modern times, there's something that the neurolinguistic program starts to talk about matching and mirroring, which I feel would probably be more effective in modern sales than just speaking fast as a modality. But coming back to the smiling, there's two reasons why that works. Um, it affects, when you smile, it affects positive biochemistry in your brain that creates positive states and positive mindsets, which allows you to do two things: overcome objections and sound more energetic and positive. And even though they are subtle, you can hear it. And it's partly because of the facial geometry, but it also affects the voice box and how your voice comes across. And then because people are hearing that, they perceive certain things.
So there's how like they hear is not a constipated sentence coming from the mouth. It's more open and it's more, you
Yeah,
know,
it's more open, it's more positive, it's more dynamic, it's got um, an energy to it
right.
that, I mean, you can tell when someone's depressed or sad on the phone. You don't need to see their face,
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of thing.
Or in some cases, I personally have that very serious problem with it. Many people, they don't know anything other than just transactional talk. I'm not saying fluff, 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 but they just only that piece, not no context here, no context there. And it's
Yes.
very dry and it's very and not at all engaging.
Hmm?
Is it right?
Yeah, that's very much the case because, and this is where, I mean, I'm not a sales specialist, but I'm more than aware that, information in and of itself is not the reason why people buy. it's state management and energy and excitement towards the product or service that you're providing that is a significant factor. So what you're referring to is really around how you shape that to create a positive outcome. And so it's one of the techniques that you can use to create a positive environment and a positive outcome.
Right. Okay. Now we will shift from this communication and talking to influencing because
Yes.
you predominantly sit there.
Yes.
What exactly is influencing? First of all,
Yeah.
uh, like answer it because we have bits and pieces of information around it in business and speaking terms, not in social media pictures and all these things. Like when someone is influencing with their presence, their saying, their behavior, and all these things.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think influence is the ability to shape the receiver's desire to listen to what you've got to say. And so that's a combination of things. It's what they think of you before you walk in the room. It's how you sound when you do open your mouth. It's their needs and expectations in the moment. It's uh, their need and desire to hear what you are going to say to them. It's the if in a sales environment, the reputation of the brand that you represent. There are a whole bunch of factors, and then hopefully, if you're doing it well, the ability to create a mutually beneficial outcome. If people believe that you've got their best interest at heart, what I call intentional, and I actually built an intentional architecture around this, and I'll go back to that in a second. But your ability to shape someone's desire to listen to you is just as important as what you say and how you say it. Yet most communication focuses on what you say and how you say it, but almost no time on building trust, building rapport, establishing relationship. These are fundamental elements that if people don't trust you, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are. It doesn't matter how good the product or service is. It doesn't matter what you know in your head. So the intention architecture that I set up and designed was really a desire by myself to understand how do you create that positive intent and that environment for receptivity by the listener. And it was really based on first of all, I'm a natural introvert, so I wasn't a great communicator to begin with, and I had to find a system. That's probably the part A. The second part was that, and I'm an ex-IT guy, I had to find data. And so one of the first things I did was I looked at all the TED data, and I worked out in the popular TED Talks what was causing people to pause, rewind, and abandon a video. And then what grade level were they using to communicate their message that allowed that to be easy to be understood. And so I took those data sets and I used that to inform the intention architecture. And so really what I feel is important, well, not important, but certainly significant in my work is the ability to have planned and deliberate outcomes for people's experiences when you open your mouth that you know are backed by data. And I think then you can predict outcomes or success of your communication when you have a baseline. But most people's baseline, especially in sales, are based on endpoints. Did you get the sale or not? It's too late by that point.
Mhm.
Or how many phone calls you've made this week. It's irrelevant if none of them buy. And
Exactly.
I think the current sales metrics are kind of like trying to drive a car with the rearview mirror. The incident has already happened. And I'm saying, come in on the front end and go, this will lead to this, will lead to this. should lead to that outcome. If it doesn't lead to that outcome, your options are A, B, and C. And I know what those options are.
Yeah. Because I was listening to one of the, his name is Chase Hughes, something like that. His name
Mhm.
is. Anyway, so he was saying that if I spent like multi-million dollar to give you a sales speech and you are not aligned with the words and the understanding of it, it will not work. So,
Like getting a bot to read the script out.
yeah, exactly. And people get it. People get it. Doesn't matter how many times you practice it, if there is no authenticity of yours. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. Is there any like first impression play in influence, like wearing a suit and tie and walk in certain way?
Look, I think in certain contexts, those things definitely count.
Hmm.
If you're turning up, representing yourself in a court of law, you know, you want to look respectable, even if it looks like you've got self-respect. But I think you need to even go before that, which is, and this comes from Art of War. There's a statement that talks around, know your enemy more than they know themselves, and you'll want to pity them more than conquer them. And
Okay.
so this is around about state management before they walk in the room, which is why I mentioned before reputation and brand, and the skill or your ability to build and rapport once you open your mouth. And they work synergistically. And I think you need to be able to dovetail your pre-work, pre-thinking, and your pre-positioning. It's also called priming in a psychological in the psychology world. They can prime you and predict or produce an outcome without you even knowing. There's a fascinating talk, a TED talk called the curly fry conundrum. And and this is based on Facebook data, if you liked a certain type of curly fry, they could combine all the other data about you underneath it and predict with a very high probability what you'd vote in the next election. And so we can use the data to read the situation. And if you're really doing a lot of forethought, you can actually prime or create an expectation in that person without them even knowing before they even walk in the room. And that's why so many organizations today focus on having aromas in their space or music in their space, because those actually appeal to our reptilian brain, our subconscious. And what they're doing is they're priming an environment so that when you do react, you think it's your choice. And sometimes it isn't. And so, to answer your question, what do you need to do to set the environment, your perception and reception and reputation before you walk in the room? How do you need to manage that when you walk in the room? And what options do you have in front of you when the outcome isn't what you expected, which in a human world is very probable? And so it's about addressing things pre, during, and
And
then
and as
fourth.
much as you can, basically. You
Yes,
you cannot do everything. So
exactly.
yeah, just be relaxed on that. And as much as you can optimize your shortcomings or whatever,
Yes.
that is
But
helpful.
you cannot do it in a reactionary manner. You've got to do it in a responsive manner. So, for instance, if you know that you waffle, you need to be clearer in your preparation, because the clearer in your head is, the clearer it is it's going to come out of your mouth. Even if you are clear and they don't respond, you've got a couple of options. You can change the angle, you can change the dynamic, or you can change the topic altogether. And so what you need to do is you need to know, well, what one of those three options would you need to take forward if the person isn't responding in the moment? So I think communication needs to be deliberate.
Hmm. Before, let's say, 10, 15 years until, yeah, until that point of time, people used to do just one thing throughout their life. Okay.
Yes.
I was not in that mindset at all. Okay. But now, because of this, shifting of social fabric and all these things, we are more and more doing not one thing, two things, three things.
Mhm.
I understand sometimes that to bracket someone for others, it's easier if they put a tag on, oh, John is a professional coach. Maybe
Yes.
he's doing like five other things or 10 other things.
Sure.
To influence, do you have to do just one thing, stick to one thing, or you can still do or produce more things
Uh,
in different?
I, I think the more things you do, the clearer you need to do about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Because if you don't know what you're doing and you only do one thing, you'll just fumble and fumble and fumble, but you'll eventually work it out.
Mhm.
But if you're doing 5 or 10 things and you're fumbling, 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 you're 5 times likely to be slower and less effective, which means everything slows down.
Mhm.
So, my general rule of thumb is get good at one thing, master it, then do the next thing. I think you're more likely to be successful that way. It doesn't mean you can't do multiple things, but don't try and do multiple things in an average way. Do one thing in a distinctive way and be known for it, then move on to the next thing.
Mm. Mm. Okay. How do we build this trust rapidly and okay, rapidly, let's you can park it, but more authentically,
Yeah,
so that this influencing kind of stay for long?
yeah,
Because people are forgetting very easily, very quickly.
yeah.
Is there any way or any strategy around it?
Again, to go above and into first principles, what's the caliber of your relationship and how much do they resonate with what's currently coming out of your mouth? They're the two objectives for influence.
Okay. Okay.
And so there's 1,000 different ways to do both those things. But each individual and each moment requires a unique approach to get that over the line. I think our ability to build trust, rapport, and relationship is incredibly important. No one wants to be spoken at, so don't speak at people. It's the whole do unto you as you have those, do unto others as you have people do unto you. I think it's that proverb. The same rule applies. This is about humans connecting with humans. And the advantage or importance of that is we cross cultural barriers, we cross knowledge barriers, we cross uh, um, technology or technicality barriers because they go, look, I didn't understand the work they said, but John's a genuinely good person. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with him, or I don't mind speaking to him. Start with that. Then work out, well, where are the needs and expectations and where is that person going? Move on to that. And then map how you think you can help them. Move on to that. So, these are broad directions, but not specific techniques. And while you can do specific techniques for each of those things, if you don't handle the broad, the specifics kind of a bit unguided, a bit random,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
Um, was it, I'm trying to remember who, I've got his face in my head, can't remember his name. Rohn, Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn said the best way to get what you want is help others get what they want.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, influence is all about that.
Yes. In one of the interviews, Angelina Jolie, way back 10 years, 15 years ago, the interviewer asked her, what kind of script you like? And her answer was something which has a rawness, something which is very polished. I don't like it because it's lack of honesty or truth. Okay. And these days, especially with AI and all these things, I'm seeing over polished pitch, over polished email. It's a in a standardized in its own way, you know. uh, like I don't feel authentic, you know, when I look into these things. So
Yeah,
how I can make my authenticity into it in this today's day and age?
sure. When I think of polished, you often think of memorized. In other words, you know it so mechanically well that you could say it without even thinking about it.
Okay.
Right? The problem with that is, as you've already identified, is it's transactional. It's I'm just going to spout out these words in a view that you will respond in a certain way and memorize their script. Do any of them look memorized? And the answer is no, because they go an extra step. They know it so well that it becomes part of their being. In the same example I gave earlier, I said, are you sure your name's not Peter? No, because that's not part of your being. Good times, you know, if I said, what's your name? Instantly it comes out. You don't think about it. It doesn't sound memorized. It doesn't sound polished because you live your identity. And I would argue that if you live and breathe your message, not your words, if you live and breathe your message, the authenticity and the integrity of that message will shine through regardless, even if you choose different words this time and next time. Because it's not about memorizing the words, it's about connecting someone to an idea in a way that adds value, the Jim Rohn thing. If you're focused on that, then it's impossible to sound polished. And I would argue that it's the imperfections that make it human. But even professional actors have a term, adding the warts to a script, which is making it sound like it's not memorized. And so I would argue that when people go, I don't want to memorize because it sounds too polished, I would argue that they're not memorized well enough. It's not embodied. It's just intellectually injected into their brain, so it intellectually comes out of their mouth. That's not polished. That's memorized. Now, if it comes out in such a way that people relate and resonate with it, maybe polish isn't necessarily bad anyway.
Hmm.
But you know, polished for polished's sake, as opposed to polished so it connects and resonates with the human being as a human being in front of them, maybe polished is not bad.
So we are almost in the wrapping up stage. And I know you have developed a data driven model of influence. And from that, can you please give our audience a 5 tips to be a better communicator and with
Sure.
some great influence?
Sure. I love data because I'm a nerd. I just want to preface this first. Data is informs a educated guess. It doesn't replace your ability to connect, engage, and resonate at a human level. So that's the first. But if you were to give, which leads me to the first tip, is connect as human beings first. The second thing is be so clear that you could articulate the simplicity of it in as few words as possible. And I gave you the example with the flight, drag, lift, thrust, and gravity are the principles by which flight is possible, which then allowed me to talk about the detail. I didn't start with the detail. So that simplicity, helping people understand that I understand drag, lift, thrust, and gravity, helps people see my expertise over my knowledge, because you can Google knowledge. So that's tip number 2. Understand the principles of the idea. The third thing is help people understand the nature or impact of what's coming out of your mouth that they can relate or resonate with. So in that example I gave you, I said initially, I'm going to talk to you about the coefficient of drag. No one cares. In the same way that I said, eat well, do lots of exercise. Everyone knows that. No one really cares. Knowledge doesn't change people's actions. How they relate and resonate with that then becomes important. So I gave in the example, the ability to fly has existed since the planet Earth has existed. That's 13 billion years. Why is it that humanity's only been able to fly in the last 200? I created a contrast or a tension where people think about the idea and relate to the idea. That's a good point. I'm interested in flying, not interested in coefficient of drag. So how do they relate and resonate with the concept so that the details connect? So that's the third point. The fourth one is do your homework. Be prepared as much as you can. Now, I have tools that allow you to quick adjust in as little as 5 minutes. So I can think about an idea for 5 minutes and come up with a compelling narrative. But that's because I have a system. And do you remember I said before, you don't rise to the level of your potential, you fall to the level of your systems. Have a system is the fourth point. And the last one really is, again, I know I keep going to this gym around helping people achieve what they want. Best way to get what you want is to help people get what they want. If that is your primary objective in all communication, then you could fumble, you could make mistakes, you might get it right, you might have to go back. But if they genuinely believe you'll want to help them, they will generally give you a chance to do that. The only time where that becomes difficult is if they have a timeline that they've got to meet. And you know what? That's just the reality of life. You can't meet everyone's needs and expectations 100% of the time. And we just have to accept that.
That we should end our podcast here. Thank you, John. Thank you for your time.
No worries. Thanks for the invitation, and hope this is helpful to people.